welcome back to the Jersey Lore podcast. How are you today, my co-host?
Oh, it's raining out. Kind of feel like I'm in like a noir film or something, doing my critical social analysis of important media in the last 2 decades.
Yeah, so anyway, so Ronnie cheats on Sam at the club.
Finally.
What do you mean, finally?
Because this is like the lead up to one of the most important artifacts that we
from
see
the
in
show.
This show.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so something occurred to me this episode. You know how they have those like transition shots and they'll just like show people from the city? You know what I mean? Like of just people walking on the stuff. There's all these shots where they'll just randomly like film girls' butts and breasts. Yeah, and it occurred to me, like, they're not showing your face, so they technically, you wouldn't have to sign anything, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. So what if one time you're just watching MTV in 2010, and you're like, those are my boobs, and they just zoomed in.
I would hope that they...
Come on, it's MTV. So it starts with the fallout from the previous episode where Ron is going to sleep in Sam's bed. And just the way
After the three-way kiss,
which feels very middle school.
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe it. Like, everyone's like, oh my god. Like, it's messed up that he did that, but also that feels like something that would be, like, scandalous in middle school. You know what I mean? Did you hear Becky and Jared and Francesca? I don't know where I pulled those names from. Did you hear they three-way kissed at the mixer after we did Guys and Dolls? Like, he keeps calling her, like, oh, that's my girl, which shows that he views her as, like, his property even after they've broken up.
Even after he called her the C word the very same night.
How is she a C word and also your girl, Ron?
Yeah. I think they do mention at the beginning of this episode that Ronnie doesn't... I don't know if this is true, but Ronnie claims that he doesn't remember that night. And that he woke up in Sammy's bed and didn't know how he got there.
That's true. That is true. But...
Which doesn't absolve him, because you should, at, like, 23 or 24, you should know your limits and know that, like...
Yeah, and even, like, the fact that instead of choosing to come clean to her immediately, he still chooses to lie once everyone in the house tells him. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I was really grossed out by the bro code in this
episode. Oh my god.
It was just, like, such a crazy contrast between the way the guys handle stuff and the way girls handle stuff, because, like, the stuff with, like, JWoww and Snooki wanting to confront Angelina and get everything out in the open, so they can, like, settle things, and, like, Angelina not wanting to, like, that's an Angelina problem, but, like, they're
at least trying to get it out in the open.
Talk about it, but the guys, they're like, oh, like, we'll cover for you because that's bro code.
Yeah.
Like, we're not going to tell anyone because that's bro code. And that's just, like, really gross.
Yeah, exactly. And it's weird, like, the show is even, like, I feel, like, complicit in that framing, like, the editing of the show. Because the sequence with Ron waking up and then all the guys telling him what happened, that's all told from his perspective. Do you know what I mean? Because we start with him waking up and walking in. We don't start with Sammy and her perspective. We're entirely sympathetic towards Ron and the situation, and like suspenseful music is played to make you like put you in the shoes of Ron and make you sympathetic towards Ron. And then I'm a film major. I don't know if that's been mentioned on the podcast before. So, like, analyzing editing and stuff, like I'm a little freaking nerd, and it is what it is. But, like, you contrast that with the way the argument between Angelina, Snooki, and JWoww is edited, and that's interspersed with footage of the guys acting nonchalantly. You have the line of Mike being like, oh, you want pretzels? So that argument is framed to look really, really stupid.
Yeah.
But it's like, it feels like there's some, like, sexism in that, where, like, Ronnie stirring up shit and cheating on Sam and treating her like an object and being a generally, like, abusive, horrible person, the editing and the way the story is told tries to make you sympathetic towards Ron, whereas Snooki and Jenny being mad that Angelina talks shit, which is, yeah, kind of petty, and they don't handle it and communicate in the best way, but it is the Jersey fucking Shore. Like,
and, like, they're trying to do it out in the open instead of just, like, holding a grudge and never talking about it.
Yeah, exactly. But, like,
because, like, as soon as, like, Ron finds out, like, what he did, he's like, oh, how can I spin this to, like, put myself in a better light? Like, how, like, what kind of tiny lie can I, like, sneak into this? Because he goes, like, oh, yeah, I'm gonna tell her that I danced with other girls,
yeah,
but I didn't kiss anyone. And it's like, why would you go into so much effort to, like, spin a lie? Like, first of all, you guys aren't even together. You called her the C word last night.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
it's just
so gross.
It's gross.
And then also, oh my god, when Polly finds out what happens, he says, that's gangsta. I lost my mind.
I also love, like, the scene of, like, and unfortunately I can't really defend my King Vinny on this. He's acting, but I want to be like, he's young. But,
yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, but there's a point where Mike is advising Ronnie, like, on how to lie, and Mike says, there's no such thing as kissing.
Yeah.
It's like, if David Schwimmer had been like, OJ, when they ask you about the gloves, say
there's no such thing
what's
as
a glove? If the glove doesn't exist,
you can't acquit.
you can acquit. You must acquit.
All of this, like, truth bending and, like, I don't know.
It's just textbook manipulation. It's just textbook.
It almost feels like Shakespearean. Like, it reminds me of, like, Othello. But, like, Iago is, like, he's, like, scheming and he's, like, whispering in everybody's ears. So then, like, everybody gets all, like, worked up over things. And it's like, yeah, that was, like, technically true. But he's definitely, like, putting his own spin on it. Like,
yeah.
This episode, like, feels very Shakespearean. With, like, the he said, she said it's,
stuff.
like, textbook Shakespeare.
And Romeo and Juliet, they're in Italy. So.
This is true.
This is true. Dude, we gotta get Annie Grace back on the podcast. Get her to talk about.
Right.
Ugh. And I also want to, like, point out that Angelina is immediately like, oh, I'm not gonna tell her. Because Angelina is, like, so insistent on being loyal to the guys. And, like,
yeah.
It's just a shame because I feel like Angelina's, like, constantly, like, bringing her own, like, gender down. Like, if you get along with guys more, that's fine. But, like, you don't need to constantly, like, be like, oh, I hate girls, I can't spend time with girls. It's like, girls are so dramatic. When it's like, Angelina, you create all these problems, and then girls don't like you, and then you say you don't like hanging out with girls. But I think the problem is you.
Yeah.
Because I think, as shown in this episode, men are willing to put up with more shit from their friends because
of the bro code.
Because of the quote-unquote bro code, and also because I think men aren't encouraged to, like, talk about their feelings with their friends as much. Yeah. So they just put up with more stuff and, like, etc. Whereas
like
girls...
Like in The Sopranos.
Okay, so where girls are, like, more encouraged to, like, communicate their feelings and communicate when something hurts them, which is, like, why Snooki and, like, Jenny feel comfortable verbalizing that, like, Angelina talking shit about them between seasons was hurtful.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, I don't know, there's so much gender stuff going on at the Jersey Shore. I'd also like to point out that the glasses that Snooki buys that you can't see anything out of are $395.
That they are.
Are those real diamonds? Like, I'm just so confused, because they look so cheap, and they have no, like, tactical purpose.
Oh, I also have a note, the way they use confessionals to discuss moral breaches in character, and also chicken falling on the floor.
Oh my god, it was like,
it turned into, like, a 10-minute thing where, like, Mike put the chicken on top of the fridge on purpose because he's like, oh, it'd be funny if, like, the chicken fell. And then, like, Snooki's like, I don't know what to do with all this chicken. And then Mike's like, clean it up. But, like, he was the one who instigated.
Yeah, and also, like,
instigator.
I love the fact that, like, like, it falls on the floor, and Snooki and Vinny don't have the good sense to take the chicken off the floor. I love, because Vinny's supposed to be the smart one, right? I love how they don't have the good sense to, like, take the chicken off the ground before walking outside and saying, hey, Mike, the chicken fell, what should you do?
Yeah.
And I love the conversation where Mike is on the phone, and they're like, what's the name? And he goes, the situation? And the other guy on the line's like, what?
And then it, like, takes him a second to, like, spell it. He goes, Situation.
It reminds me of, like, I remember this one time, this lady came up, and this lady, like, I don't know how to describe, like, but she seemed like she was, like, American or whatever. Like, she didn't have an accent or anything like that. So, like, okay, so she comes up, and, like, the order is fine or whatever. And I was like, you know, what's the name for the order? And she goes, oh, it's fat. And I was like, pardon? And she goes, yeah, it's fat. F-A-T. And I was like, is that short for Fatima? And she was like, no, it's just fat. And I was like, okay. And, like, the way it worked, because I was, like, a cashier, and then the name in the order would, like, show up on the, like, in the back on their screen. So I was like, this woman was really insistent on making her name Fat on the order. So I put it in, and, like, 3 seconds later, my boss comes out, and he's like, what the, because it was, like, my second week there. My boss is like, he's like, is that sure, are you sure that's what she said? And I was like, I checked it with her 3 separate times, and she spelled it for me. And he was like, okay. And that was just her name. Like, she just walked out with it. So, that was crazy. I was almost fired, like, my second week. I wondered, what I was thinking is, I wonder if this lady, like, went to, like, a bunch of restaurants, and she wanted to try and get people fired, so she would just saying, like, put her name as, like, increasingly more offensive things. She's like, how can I spark a little chaos in the world today?
She walks to McDonald's, and she's like, yeah, my name's Shithead.
Yeah, so then you have the argument between Sam and Ron regarding his ex-girlfriend and her name being in his phone book. And I don't want to victim blame, because obviously, like, I don't know if I've said it before, but, like, in no uncertain terms, Ron and Sam's, like, relationship is abusive. Ron is abusive towards her. Like, there's no gray area at this point. It's all documented. But they're not in a relationship. And then she purposely goes into his phone book and looks for girls, and then gets mad when his ex-girlfriend is in there. And it's like, at that point, you're broken up. You know what I mean? Like, I really feel like you can't be mad about that. What do you think?
Yeah, I feel like it's just, again, a case where people do things that they normally wouldn't do because they're drinking all the time. Because, like, there is, like, a part of you that definitely would want to know, like, who is my ex calling?
Yeah.
If you were sober, you wouldn't act on those, like, intentions. But she probably wasn't sober. So that, like, subconscious part of her, like, everybody has that, you know? It's like, oh, like, it didn't work out with this person, but, like, I wonder what they're up to, like, that kind of thing. So, like, I can understand her being interested, and I think she just... It's definitely not an excuse, but I think, like, I can understand where she's coming from on an emotional level. Should she have done that? Like, technically, like, no, that is, like, a breach of privacy.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, then going to Ronnie and confronting him about it is also a little... If they hadn't slept in the same bed the night before, I would have been less sympathetic towards Sammy, but they did do that.
Yes.
And it seems like that something might have happened between them. It seems like...
Because I think she said, I love you when he got into bed, or
Yeah.
somebody said, I love you.
Yeah.
Which, yikes.
Yeah. And so I would definitely, my feelings would definitely be hurt if I was like, oh, this is so exciting, I'm getting back to this person. Oh, wait, like, they have somebody else's phone number. But at the same time, I wouldn't act on those feelings because I would recognize that's just my personal insecurity, jealousy, whatever. Like, we all have that. It's just whether we choose to act on it or not.
Mm-hmm.
But because the Jersey Shore means that everyone's drunk all the time, people are acting on these, like, more subconscious, like, insecurities and, like, jealousies. Because, like, alcohol just kind of, like, opens that Pandora's box where it's, like, you just kind of, like, do and say anything you want to do. Sometimes that's a good thing. A lot of times that's a bad thing.
Yes. I hadn't thought about that. Like, I don't know. Usually, I quite naively assume that during the day they're sober, but that's probably not true.
That's at least what I'm thinking.
That's
smart.
I
feel like Sammy can be more... She can be a lot more reasonable.
Yeah, exactly. Well, also, she's probably thinking, like... Because her and Ron, at that point, hadn't really had a clear conversation of, like, oh, we're together. You know? And, like, she's probably thinking, like... trying to figure that out without directly talking to him. So then she goes into his phone book to see if... Yeah. Anyway, I also have the note... How does Angelina have so many friends?
Yeah.
I don't understand. I wonder... Here's my theory. Because I have not seen much of Family Vacation. I've seen, like, some clips here and there. Doesn't really appeal to me. It does not have the charm of the original show. Nothing will ever have the charm of the original show.
Yeah,
but
it just seems, like, depressing.
What I've understood... Well, also especially from looking at the subreddit... that in the new series, Angelina is, like, one of the more likable people. Like, she comes off pretty well in the new series. So, what I was gonna say is that I wonder if, like, Angelina was putting on, like, a persona for this show a little bit. Like, you know, she feels defensive, right? And she... is like, I'm gonna be, like, the bitch or whatever because I'm feeling defensive and insecure because I'm been put in this vulnerable position of being, like, on a national TV show. So I wonder, maybe at home she's a really nice girl, but then she's put into this vulnerable position of, like, being on a reality TV show, and that's why she gets like that. What do you think?
I don't know.
Really?
It's definitely possible that she's had a lot of personal growth since the first few seasons. It's also possible that the editing paints her in a specific light that maybe if you'd seen all the raw footage and had more context for what was going on, it would make her seem better. But just the way that she hunkers down and, like, denies facts that, like, everyone agrees on, like, that's not, like, normal person stuff. Like, you don't accidentally back yourself into a corner, like, all the time, even though you know it would just be easier if you just told the truth. Like, that's not, like, an I'm insecure thing. That's, like, a I cannot be wrong thing. That's, like, a narcissist
That's the
thing.
opposite of being insecure. Yeah, I guess I hadn't thought about it like that. Like, I want to give these people, like, the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, I know that in the first... So you mentioned in the first season, like, the producers, like, didn't like her, so, like, the editing made her look a lot worse than she was or something.
Yeah, I read that on a Reddit thread, so that could be false, but yeah,
I know that, like, they only gave Angelina, like, a day in advance before they started shooting, so that's why she brought all of her stuff in garbage bags, because she didn't have time to get suitcases. So I know that there's other stuff going on behind the scenes that they don't address, and because they're very interested in creating certain, like, plot lines.
Yeah.
So I definitely, I want to believe that, like, there was other stuff going on that we just didn't get to see because of editing, but from what you see in the show, the way she's always backing herself into a corner, it reminds me exactly of when I worked with this one student and he had gum in his mouth, and like the school I was working at had like a really strict no gum policy, and I kept saying like, I see your gum, like I see you chewing it, like I see you like blowing a bubble in my face, like you have to throw it out. And then he would like hide it under his tongue or like somewhere in his mouth, and then open his mouth and be like, I don't have gum, and like just open his mouth and show it to me. It's like, I literally saw you blowing a bubble 2 seconds ago. I know you have gum. And so it turned into this like 15-minute thing where I was like, I know that you have gum. And he'd be like, no, I don't. And then he was like, I don't know, he like worked himself up into like such a tizzy and like convinced himself that he didn't have gum in his mouth. And so because I was not going to let it drop because he was lying to my face, he started crying. It was like, you're so mean. And I'm like, you have gum in your mouth. If you just spat it out, we could move on. He convinced himself that, like, he, like, gaslit himself into thinking that he was right.
He's manifesting.
15-minute back and forth because he couldn't just admit that he had gum in his mouth. And that's exactly the kind of stuff that
maybe it was really good gum. Maybe it was really good gum. I think you failed to consider that.
It's the same stuff that Angelina does, except this kid was in 5th grade.
Yeah. So then that transitions nicely into the fight between Snooki, Jenny, and Angelina. So what kicks off this fight is Sammy telling Snooki and Jen that Angelina had been talking poorly about Emilio and Tom, who are both their boyfriends and who both suck. So I'm like, yes, you can be mad at Angelina, but don't do it on their behalf. Both those guys are proven to be trash later in the series. Yeah. So I'm kind of like, yeah. So then you have Snooki, and she's yelling at Angelina, and she's kind of incoherent. And then JWoww walks in. And, like, the way JWoww walks in, where, like, each step is, like, very, like, defined. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can see her. I'm going to put the clip or whatever, because it's a great clip, first of all. But she comes in, and she looks like she's, like, a cheetah, like, stalking prey. And then she says something like, I've heard you, like, that you run in your mouth all around town. And she says it like she's, like, Vito, like, Corleone, like.
Ice? You ran your mouth to my best friends.
She's, like, says it with, like, just this air. Ugh. Like, that entrance is, like, bro, I literally want to be JWoww. Like, I just want to be her. Like, undeniably. So then they have this argument where Angelina, again, just, like, doubles down. I wish, like, it would just solve so much problems if she had been like, yeah, I talk shit about you because I don't like you. Like, just, like, if you're gonna do that.
Like, yeah.
And then she's like, where'd you hear that from? And then Jen goes, I heard it from J420, Joey Yanks.
Joey Yanks.
Bill. Do you think they're talking about Bill Clinton?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So then you have the iconic quote from JWoww, where she lays out Angelina's options for the future. She can, number one, she can stay and get her ass beat.
You want to get your ass beat, you get your ass beat. You can stay, get your ass beat.
Quote. Number two, she can stay and get her ass beat.
You can stay, get your ass beat. Okay.
Or number three, she can stay and get her ass beat.
You can stay, get your ass beat. All right.
She says to Angelina that she's going to, quote, let her sweat it out. I'm gonna let you sweat it out. And Angelina returns with, okay. Okay. And then Jenny signs off with a sweat it, bitch. Also, you've got the great moment where the phone is calling and it's one of Angelina's friends, and Snooki picks it up, and she goes,
Angelina's dead.
He's like, where's Angelina? And she goes, oh, she died, and then hangs up. And then she immediately, like, he calls again, Angelina picks up, and he's like, Angelina, die! He believed it, which I think is the funniest thing.
I did want to talk about the tattoo that Ronnie gets.
Ugh.
It was just, like, really, I don't know, it came off as very abuser-ish to, like, he put himself in this situation where he's like, yeah, I'm gonna be in a lot of pain, I need you to be there for me. So then she, like, goes, like, I'll always be there for you, and, like, comforts him because he knows that she still has feelings for him.
Yeah. It's weird. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
It's weird because Ronnie's, like, he's presented as, like, he's a dumb guy. Like, Ronnie is a stupid man. Yes. Undeniably. But then when it comes to Sam, he knows how to, like, manipulate her, like, perfectly. It's so
gross.
And it, like, almost makes me, I'm like, I just don't understand it. I don't. Because it's like, is he consciously doing these things, or does he not even, like, realize? Because, like, I genuinely don't think he is smart enough to So I'm just like, where is it coming from then?
I don't know. It's really gross. And, like, the fact that he had been considering telling Sammy the whole truth, but then when she confronted him about the phone number in his book, he's like, yeah, I'm not going to tell her. I'm going to punish her.
Yeah, exactly.
What? Like, that's not a punishment. That's just, like, you being an asshole.
And then it's, like, him who reaches out to her to, like, with this tattoo thing.
Yeah, and then the tattoo, like, looks really bad. Like, a tattoo that's, like, on your, like, stuff that's, like, on your, like, hand or your foot or your ribs where it's, like, really close to bone. Those are the kind of tattoos that, like, hurt the most because they're right up on your bone. So, like, to do that and, like, go through all that pain and all that effort and all that money to get, like, a bad tattoo is just, like, boy.
And then you've got this fight with, like, Angelina, Mike, and Polly.
Yeah.
Which I don't understand. Like, I don't understand what she was upset about.
So, at the club, a girl that Polly was making out with was engaged. And so she was trying to tell Polly, but he didn't care that she was engaged. And then Ange got mad that Polly
brushed her off.
Going to take her advice. And then at one point Ange said, I love you, I want to marry you.
Do you think she was just in love with Polly and was jealous?
I could see it. I know that she's hooked up with both Mike and Polly, which is kind of...
Yeah, because I think Angelina's strategy was like, I'm going to get in their good graces because I hooked up with them. So therefore, Mike and Polly are my security in the house because we hooked up before. So then now that they're going to the clubs and hooking up with other girls, she feels like that security is challenged and she gets upset.
Yeah, and which leads to her, like dancing with girls because for some reason she thinks that, I don't know. And then there's something where I have in my notes, Polly says gay rights. I think in the confessional he says something about, like, yeah, like, most women, like, they're tending to go that way. They're tending to like both these days. So, like, I don't know. The Polly kind of says gay rights. We have the T slur, but we also have support for the B and the LGBTQ community in this episode.
Do you think Polly's a TERF? I love how someone just slammed the door after that. Yeah, and also I do like how Polly reacts to this fight. Because unlike Mike, unlike Snooki, unlike Jenny, he just, like, doesn't engage with Angelina. Because there's no way you...
He hates confrontation.
Which is, like, I don't know. Like, I just think that, like, this is a case where the fact that, like, Polly is 30 by this season happens, like, really shows. Because, like, I feel like the rest of the cast would have just sat and argued with her. Where, meanwhile, Polly was, like, actively walking away. He's actively saying, don't talk to me, which is, like, what you say in a situation like that when you're a mature adult. And he only gets upset with her when she hits him.
Yeah. And then later she, like, because she hits him, and then he, like, leaves and goes outside, and then she, like, goes out and like touches his arm. He goes like, "Did you touch me?" Like, blah, blah, blah. Like,
Yeah, that's the famous like GIF, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Then yeah, but it's weird seeing him like actually angry. But like I would understand why. And like that is the thing with the show, is that because they can't just go leave, like these conflicts just like boil over. And it's also kind of awkward because like I'm thinking and I'm like, don't they all share a room? Don't Mike, Polly, and Angelina like sleep in the same room? Where did they sleep after that? Like, did they just have that confrontation? They're like, okay, good night.
I mean, they probably just like pass out because they stay out super late and like drink a lot. Wait, was this the episode where? Yeah, in the beginning of the episode where like, it's before like the morning aftermath. They have like a little like montage of like, I don't know, just like people in their beds and like, I don't know, and they cut to Mike like reaching over and taking a sip of his beer and then going back to bed, and that just destroyed me.
This was like a serious one.
It was. Yeah.
But cancel Ron.
Yeah,
There's absolutely no nuance on my opinions on Ron.
No. Like, Sammy, like, not in a victim blaming way, it's just that, like, because of the situation that she was in, and, like, I don't know, it was just kind of, like, the perfect storm for her, where, like, because she was, like, the things that Sammy does are excusable, the things that Ronnie does are not.
Exactly, yeah, because it's, like, I don't know, like, when Sammy's not with Ron, like, when she's just happy hanging out with the girls, like, you can really see, like, she's a sweet person. Like,
Sammy's sweetheart.
She's the sweetest bitch you'll ever meet. But, like...
Did you just come up with that?
I did! But, like, yeah, like, she, you know, like, she seems like a really sweet, like, genuine person, but it's just, like, that's what, unfortunately, like, abuse looks like. Like, you get, like, brainwashed, you know? Tune in next week for a probably more fun episode.